New Zealand stunned South Africa with their quick start. My name is Mark, let's talk rugby. The All Blacks have a lot of early possession in this one. We have some good runs from the likes of Jordan and Voxel, really giving them front football. They're keeping a high tempo, and eventually the Springboks get caught offside, but the All Blacks decide to keep on playing with the advantage. We have a lovely long cutout pass from Jordie Barrett to Jordan on the wing. He gets caught by Willie le Roux but not held, so he releases the ball, gets up and goes again, gets himself in behind and then pops it off to Smith, who goes over to score. It's converted by Mo'unga for 7-0. The Springboks then get caught offside again. This one is on the edge of their own 22 and straight in front. It was kind of funny to see Etzebeth holding Mathieu Reynal in the ruck, because I guess he just saw a set of legs in front of him. But then Mo'unga slots the penalty and we're at 10-0 and it's already looking ominous. We then have the first scrum of the game and New Zealand win the penalty as there's a knee on the ground from Malherbe. De Groot has been, I think, a very important addition to the All Blacks scrum. Really stepped up this year and turned them from, a decent scrum into a very good destructive scrum. All Blacks then continue to apply pressure in possession. We got Will Jordan gets himself through a gap in midfield. He finds Taylor out wide, who then gives on to Voxel on the wing. He bumps off the covering tackle of le Roux and goes over to score. Mo'unga then nails the sideline conversion, and I think that kind of underlines his advantage in that area over Damien McKenzie, who was very wasteful from the tee against Argentina in the first round. South Africa, desperate to spark something, decide to go with a quick throw, and it's a poor pass. It bounces and Visa knocks on. Not really much he could do with that, but it kind of sums up the start of the game. Luckily though for South Africa, we don't come back for the scrum because there was a high tackle from Voxel, so let off for South Africa and feel like they've got to do something now with this chance that they have. Voxel though makes amends by winning a penalty at the breakdown, and South Africa just can't get into the game at this stage. Springboks then, they do finally get a period of possession. They're making ground and going forward. De Klerk, he's bouncing around. He has a little snipe as well that gives them a little bit of momentum. They win a penalty and decide to go for the corner. They set up them all 10 metres out, but they're going nowhere. New Zealand do really well to get in and disrupt and turn the ball over, but then they knock on. Another chance for South Africa from the scrum. They can't make any ground though, so De Klerk decides to go for a crossfield kick. It's Beauden Barrett versus Cheslin Kolbe. Barrett gets up high, he claims the ball, but then Kolbe strips it. We have a TMO check to see if Kolbe has grounded the ball or not and whether it's a try. It's deemed that he actually knocks the ball on. I could see it going either way, but looking at it, I agree with the TMO on this one. It's a goal line dropout to New Zealand. Voxel, they come back on attack, not really securing the ball very well though. It squirts out the side. Taylor dives on it for New Zealand. South Africa get in over the ball and they force a penalty. De Klerk decides to take the point, slots the penalty from in front. 17-3 and South Africa finally on the board. At the restart then, Aaron Smith throws a bullet of a pass into Kitsoff, who is offside. Mo'unga slots the penalty and we're back to 20-3 in a 70-point margin. Box then come forward as we approach the break. We have a high tackle from Mapimpi by Talea, allows them to kick into the corner. De Jager claims the line out, but again New Zealand do well to halt them all. South Africa decide to go to one out runners. They got space out on the opposite wing out on the left for them, but they decide to keep it in the forwards. Etzebeth goes over, but he gets held up over the line. We go to a TMO check, but then the TMO tells Reynal that there was actually a neck roll from the Jager earlier on in the move, and so now New Zealand tap the penalty, kick it out, and that's half time. Half-time score is 20-3. All Blacks with such a fast start, South Africa couldn't really live with them, in the early periods of the half. they did work their way back into the game, but New Zealand disrupting in the line out at the breakdown, making it very difficult for them to get any kind of platform. And New Zealand's kicking game was spot on. And not just the kicking game, the chases as well, making it very hard for South Africa to claim any of those kicks. 70-point margin, at the break is a big ask to come back. And honestly, I have to say, if it was Ireland, I don't think that we'd be able to do it. Our game is just not conducive to chasing that kind of deficit. In fairness, we rarely actually have to do that. But I think if we had to, we would probably come up short as we have done in the past. South Africa, though, they've got a little bit of an edge in that area, I think, over Ireland. And I felt like at halftime that if they got an early score, maybe they would be able to come back into the game. And it's kind of interesting as well that some of the players who came back into the team, who went to New Zealand early on, the likes of Dielende, Willemse, De Jager and Smith, had struggled in the first half. Smith, in fairness to him, had a bigger impact in the second half though. Sam Cane doesn't return for the start of the second half. He's off injured and Papali'i is on for him. New Zealand start the second half back in attack. They have a decent maul and they decide to spread the ball inside. Jordan steps his way through the defence but drops it under pressure close to the post. The Springboks then bring on Marks, Neyman, Peter stepped to Toy all in the first few minutes, and then Vermeulen shortly after as well. The Boks win a penalty at a scrum as the replacements have an immediate impact for them. De Klerk, though, kicks the penalty dead, and it wasn't even close. Like, he went way over the try line when he was kicking it. And big let off for New Zealand as South Africa were looking for that momentum at the start of the half. It's a scrum back. De Klerk then he goes off after he trips over Vitalik, seems to have bumped his knee or something, and just as he was on the ground as well, Kitshoff fell over and fell on top of him as well, so that didn't help. But he's off, and he was probably one of the brighter players for South Africa in this game. South Africa then, they're working the ball forward. They win a penalty for hands on the ground from Vitalik. They decide to kick into the corner. And then for the first time in the game, their maul gets some real go forward. Marks scores as they drive over, and a real impact from the bench, not just from him, but from the other players that come on into the pack as well. Colby then takes over the kicking duties and he converts from out wide. And it was funny though, because he converted, but he actually slipped just after he kicked it, but it still got over. Quagga Smith then gets pinged for playing the 9 just inside their own half. It's a bit silly because he was told by Reynal, don't play the 9, and he immediately did. All Blacks decide to point to the post. Mwanga has the distance and it's absolutely straight down the middle as well, 23-10. And I felt at that stage could be the decisive kick at the end of the game because South Africa were coming back a little bit. South Africa then back on attack for Vermeulen and Du Toit with some good carries. Then they give it out to the backs and we have a peach of a pass, puts Colby over in the corner. He kind of dives over to score. There's some confusion as to whether it's actually a try or not because Reynal has cramp and he's more worried about that than whether or not he is awarded a try. Timo checks the final pass and confirms that it's all good, so the try is awarded. Colby then hits the post with the touchline conversion at 23-15. And at this stage then it's tense at the breakdown from both teams, both committing in there and making it really difficult for the opposition. But it's New Zealand who win the next penalty as Leroux basically played the ball on the ground because New Zealand he was in that kind of long placement thing. New Zealand were driving over and then he was just still on the ball pushing it towards the South Africa side, but he gets pinged for That one, New Zealand decide to go up the line from there. They hold onto the ball for a number of phases into 22. They've got penalty advantage, and Barrett decides to cross kick to Jordan, who kind of juggles with the ball a bit, but is able to gather and score in the corner. Mo'unga converts this one from out wide. We're at 35-15. South Africa then get pinged for not rolling close to their own line, and New Zealand opt for the scrum. I kind of felt like that showed New Zealand's confidence in the scrum. Normally you wouldn't see, many teams opting for a scrum when they have the chance to kick a penalty into the corner against the South Africa team, but for the most part New Zealand were on top in the scrum. Very stable scrum from them. Sabea goes off the back, gives it to Mo'unga, who just glides over to score, and that is pretty much game over. He does miss the conversion, but it's 35-15 and feels like no way back with 10 minutes to go for South Africa. Jordie Barrett then turns the ball over in his own 22, but shortly after, Quagga Smith pounces on the ball that has come out of the back of the ruck. He then powers over to score. There's a drop kick conversion, not sure by who, but it gets missed. 35-20, and that was our full-time score. Bonus point win for New Zealand, and that should be really the championship too after that. Let's now have a look at some of the stats from the game. So on attacks, tries 4-3 for New Zealand. They were on that count, they were always that little bit ahead of South Africa, and then obviously the penalties as well just gave them that margin that it never really felt like South Africa were really threatening a decisive comeback. Meters carried 337 to 287. New Zealand with a lot of go forward in the first half. The impact from the bench from South Africa then helped them to kind of close that gap in the second half. Carries 119 to 109. Defenders beaten 28 to 21. So both teams really getting some joy in kind of open play. Clean breaks though, dominated by New Zealand 9-3, just showed, when they made their breaks that they made them count as well. Passes 187 to 183. New Zealand wanting to hold on to the ball and make the South Africa pack work as much as they could. Offloads 9-6. Turnovers conceded then 10-12. Again, you can see from that stat that New Zealand really were in there, forcing the errors and turning ball over at the breakdown as well. On defence then, tackles made 127 to 151. South Africa made to work, especially in that first half, a lot on defence. Missed tackles 21 to 26, and turnovers 1-4 each. But that was in New Zealand's favour in the first half of the field, and then South Africa kind of tied it up in the second half. Kicks and play 27 to 14. It felt like New Zealand were really on top of the kicking game. South Africa with Willemse at 10, not really having a great kicking strategy. Conversions 4-3. Conversion accuracy 75 to 33 in the third. Penalty goals 3-1, and penalty goal actually 100% each. Then onto the breakdown, Rucks won 91 to 74. Again, New Zealand felt like they had the edge in that for most of the game. Rucks lost 4 each, and the ruck percentage 95.8 to 94.9. Mauls won 3 to New Zealand and 4 to South Africa, but it felt like for most of the game, New Zealand had the advantage in that, even though the stats would say otherwise, because they halted this South Africa maul for apart from the one that resulted in the try. Then set plays, lineouts won 14 to 10. Lineouts lost says 0, but you can see from the lineout percentage 93.3 to 90.9 that New Zealand did the better job at disrupting. Scrum ones then won 7 to 5, and the scrum percentage 87.5 to 83.3, but again, it felt like New Zealand really had the edge on that one. Discipline, penalties conceded 8 to 12. New Zealand just piling on that pressure at scrum time and also at the ruck as well, forcing those penalties for them. And I felt like the stats really do tell you that New Zealand were on top for most of the game. In terms of both teams then, New Zealand really coming back into form just in time for the Rugby World Cup. And I think the rest of the world need to sit up and take notice of this performance because it was very special. South Africa showing they got plenty of depth, but there's still a lot of question marks to answer in terms of who are the starters in key positions for them.